Alderman Newman.
Here.
Alderman Rummel.
Here.
Alderman Preschlack.
Here.
Alderman Goshgarian.
Here.
Alderman Moreno is absent. Alderman Bushman.
Here. Mr.
Mr. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Biddy. Would you all please rise and join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Figure out how to go in the same direction.
Smaller chairs.
First item on the agenda is reports of city officers, comments by the mayor, and we have a number of items tonight, so bear with us. The first item on our agenda is a resolution of sympathy for Lake Forest resident Nancy Hughes. I'm going to read that. Whereas, on behalf of the city of Lake Forest, the City Council expresses its profound sadness at the loss of Nancy Lou Hughes on September 15th, 2019. And whereas Nancy Hughes will be remembered as a longtime resident of Lake Forest, and who, through her generosity, helped ensure that Lake Forest will remain a special place far into the future. And whereas Nancy Hughes was the beloved wife of the late John Hughes and cherished and devoted mother of John and James, mother-in-law to Rhoda and Tracy, and grandmother to Caitlin, Will, Livia, and Henry. And whereas Nancy Hughes was an extraordinary philanthropist who supported causes great and small to further the arts, preserve open space, advance health care, and enhance recreational opportunities within the city of Lake Forest. And whereas Nancy Hughes most recently stepped forward as a leader to preserve Forest Park and the beachfront, our community treasures. Her leadership allowed the city not just to make repairs, but to provide a fitting entrance to the beach, which today is known as the Hughes Gateway. And whereas the impact of Nancy Hughes' generous contributions is visible throughout the community, Lake Forest residents and visitors to the community will long enjoy and benefit from the John and Nancy Hughes Pavilion at Northwestern Lake Forest Hospital, the John and Nancy Hughes Theater at Gorton Community Center, and the John and Nancy Hughes Clubhouse at Deer Path Golf Course, and the Hughes Gateway to the beach. And whereas Nancy Hughes was a strong, enthusiastic, and kind woman who deeply loved her family and our community and gave selflessly to assure that others had opportunities. And whereas Nancy Hughes will be missed as a resident and as a friend. Now therefore be it resolved that the City Council of the City of Lake Forest, in session on October 7th, 2019, hereby expresses its deep regret and sincere sympathy to the members of the Hughes family. Be it further resolved that this resolution be appropriately inscribed and conveyed to the Hughes family, with a copy to be included in the official minutes of the October 17th, 2019 meeting of the Lake Forest City Council. And Mr. Bob Pasquesi, as a representative of the Hughes family, would like to say a few words.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I'm very privileged to be here tonight representing the Hughes family, and they're grateful for the resolution that you just passed. Nancy spent half her life in Lake Forest. She was an extremely intelligent, private, behind-the-scenes individual, dedicated to her family, taking care of her parents, her children, her grandchildren. I've been privileged to know her for 25 years, and she loved Lake Forest greatly, and we will miss her. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. It's a great loss.
Mayor?
And now I'd ask for a motion to approve the resolution.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'm not going to ask if anybody's opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is presentation of fabulous gifts and prizes to departing Alderman Tim Newman.
Thank you. He laughs. I'm not sure why. But,
Police are coming for you.
Here they come.
well, again, it is my honor to continue a long-standing tradition here in the city of Lake Forest in presenting outgoing aldermen with gifts on behalf of the community. So.
Oh, very nice. Thank you. I think Mike Thomas has a hand in this.
It's always an adventure to see what they came up with.
Let's see. Newman Drive.
Newman, wait, flip it over. You know there are two sides.
Turn the other side. That's the better side.
Which one's going to show?
Always a sense of humor. It's great. Thank you very much.
You want to get,
Oh, sure.
not that one.
An accurate scorecard, please.
Want to put it back?
Sure. Thank you.
I'll read that.
Well, I would invite any of our council members to say a few words about their time with Alderman Newman.
Yeah, I'll start.
Agenda tonight, so keep it short.
A lot of noise going on.
I know.
I just wanted to say that we're going to lose a terrific colleague. It's been my pleasure to work with you, and I've learned, working with the city council, that the colleagues that you have here are the ones you can rely on, the ones you can share a joke with, the ones you can work together, and the ones you can ask for help. And you've helped a lot, especially with the pension modeling and the strategy for funding pensions have been terrific. I think you've been an outstanding alderman, and I'm going to miss you very much. So
Thank you
best
very much,
wishes to
Jed.
you.
So I may be one of the few aldermen who, well, actually, I think that we realized tonight, there are probably only a couple of us who are here tonight who were here when you came. But I think of the group that were aldermen then, most of them knew you already, and I didn't. So it was a great pleasure to get to know you, and it's been a continuing pleasure. I've really enjoyed it. I agree. Again, a great person to have in a foxhole. You've got our backs, which is great, but you make us laugh at the same time. I will say what I didn't see coming with Tim. Although I know that you'd come before council and talked about your Evans Scholar time and how committed you were to that program, and I can't even remember if that was, I think that was why you were here, was to talk about the Evans Scholar program. Anyway, not that long after that, you were here as an alderman. And the program, the project to improve the golf course, the Deer Path Golf Course, our city's course, had already, it was certainly conceptual, but it hadn't, there hadn't been a fundraising plan put in place. And somehow, without my noticing how you did it, you encouraged me to use my past experiences in this community and doing some fundraising to get involved. And along the way, it was wonderful fun. I learned about I already knew about your passion for the city. Your passion for the Deer Path Golf Course it would not be possible to be more committed to that course than Tim Newman. But somehow your passion for golf, now I can't claim to have had success with golf particularly, but you got me persuaded that I should actually try to take on a new game in my golden years here, and I'm really enjoying it. And you don't know this, I've never said this before, but every time I pick up a golf club, which is not constantly, but I like to do it, I think of you, and I think, well, this is an enduring gift from Tim, who believed that maybe this would frankly make me a better fundraiser for the golf course.
My legacy to you.
Thank you, Tim. Enjoyed working with you.
Well, Tim, you're a large shadow to stand or sit next to. And thank you for your dedication to the city for all of these years, and to Ward 2. If there's ever an email from a resident, Tim is the first one on it. I mean, it's hard to respond. Tim is there immediately, and so he did an incredible job representing the residents of Ward 2, and I think all of us are very fortunate to have had him on this dais representing us. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for your friendship as well, and for all of your years of work for the city, not just on the city council, but Tim, you've been a force in this city for many, many, many years, and I hope you will continue to do that in your retirement. You will be much missed on this dais, so thank you.
I'm not going far, so.
Good.
Thank you.
We're going.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. I think you always wonder what to say about someone, but I think the most important thing is thank you, because Tim has really stepped up for our community. He was president of the caucus, which is a big job. It's trying to manage all the volunteers that serve on the boards and commissions, and he did that admirably, very well. He was on the Plan Commission. That's a big job too, for 6 years, and then he came on the council. And I think that's really what makes this town special, and Tim really embodies the, the civic-minded, just volunteerism and the spirit of our community. And he's really had an impact in so many different ways, the golf course and the pension fund and just having fun and also golf. So Tim, please don't use this golf ball, but we all signed it, and we can get some more on it after your dinner. There'll probably be some other colleagues that want to sign it, but here's saying thank you and all the best in the future with
We
your
may need another
golf.
ball.
Thank you very much.
Autographed golf ball.
Don't shank it.
How can I not?
We got a theme.
Well, Tim, I'm probably the one who's going to feel the greatest loss because I've had you for such a short while, and I'm looking forward to serving with our incoming aldermen. But I've had enough of an exposure to you to realize that for me, it's a personal loss because I have truly enjoyed our time together. We've talked about your wisdom, your expertise, your knowledge, your insight, which I think are truly inherent to you, but the word that really didn't resonate quite loudly enough was his leadership skills, and Tim is a leader. And I'm indebted to you so many ways in terms of your help that you provided me in terms of understanding some of the issues, and you've always been willing to converse, and that loss of leadership and you sitting in that chair for me is going to be a tremendous loss. I'm going to leave you with a thought from Groucho Marx, if I may. Only one man in 1,000 is a leader of men. The rest of us follow women. But Tim is a leader of both men and women, and I thank you for your leadership, and I know you're not going far, but I just want to extend my sincerest gratitude. And thank you for all you've done, and I'm glad you're not going far.
Thank you, Aaron.
Certainly, your physical presence is something that overshadows many men and women, but it's also something that has provided a great deal of benefit to the city over the years. And also, as long as we're talking about your size, I feel sorry for the future alderman who has big shoes to fill. But you've done a fantastic job providing guidance and education to the council, particularly in the area of finance, in the area of pension needs. I really thought the open letters that you provided and helped draft regarding our pension situation, where we stand, what the city has done, was very educational to myself as a council member, I think to the city as a whole. So thank you very much for your contributions, and wish you the best of success in the future endeavors.
Thank you, Ray.
Well, I guess I get to have the last word here. I was the other second ward alderman when Tim joined the council, and we used to like to say that between the two of us, we had one above average sized, alderman for the second ward. So, and I know the comments about the big shoes to fill. I mean, I think we found a guy that can almost do it in Ted Notes. He's no small guy, but anyway, it's been a pleasure to work with you. We've known each other since our kids were in school together. The contributions to figuring out a really revolutionary approach to our pension challenges which was, a great team, but you were certainly a leader on that team. And the motivation behind the golf course and getting so much accomplished there with the help of Alderman Beidler, who I think needed to know a little bit more about golf, and you were the guy to give her that knowledge. And I'd also like to give thanks to your long-suffering wife, Diane, who is here tonight, which is a great treat. So, we all have spouses that are at home waiting, sometimes patiently, sometimes not so patiently, for their spouses to come home after these meetings. And it's a lot of time, and a lot of time away from the family at times when most people are with their families. So thank you for being willing to do all that work, for your service to the caucus, for your service to the Plan Commission, and for all the contributions you've made here.
Thank you,
We're
Mr.
gonna miss
Mayor.
you. So, we have a resolution of appreciation. So tonight is my night to read resolutions. So I will read this, and then we will bid you farewell, although it is, as I said before, it's the last meeting, but it's certainly not the last hurrah. We got plans for you. So, whereas Timothy P. Newman, AKA the 6'8" from Decatur, has been involved in the community since moving here in 1994 as president of the Lake Forest Club, the Lake Forest Lake Bluff Rotary Club, and the Lake Forest Caucus. And whereas during his term of office, Tim served the city as a member of the City Council, Pension Committee, Public Works Committee, Personnel, Compensation and Administration Committee, Business and Commerce Committee, and chaired the Golf Advisory Committee. And whereas he was a member of the Plan Commission from 2006 to 2012, bringing his expertise to discussions of affordable housing, Elwha Farm, wireless service facilities, the new Northwestern Lake Forest Hospital Campus, bicycle master plan, tax increment financing districts. And whereas on City Council, Tim was often looked to as a resource providing financial insight and business acumen. And whereas he led efforts to rehabilitate the Deer Path Golf Course and raise private funds to rejuvenate the game of golf in Lake Forest, and stressed the importance of making the game an excellent course and venue open to all. And whereas being an Evans Scholar at Purdue University, Tim was instrumental in bringing BMW Golf Championship to Conway Farms Golf Club in 2013, 15, and 17. Tim subsequently helped educate the public about the importance of Evans Scholars, who are the beneficiaries of the BMW Championship. And whereas the City Council, Plan Commission, and staff were often lucky enough to be surprised and delighted by one of Tim's famous culinary treats, whereas he has devoted much valuable time and personal attention to the work of these committees and the duties of the City Council, and on behalf of the residents of the Second Ward and the citizens of Lake Forest, continually met his responsibilities with purpose and dedication. And whereas the citizens of Lake Forest recognize and are deeply appreciative of the valuable time and service contributed to the preservation and improvement of the quality of life in our community, now therefore be it resolved that the City Council of the City of Lake Forest, Illinois hereby expresses the profound gratitude of the citizens of Lake Forest to Timothy P. Newman for the loyal and faithful public service he has given by means of this resolution, which shall be spread upon the permanent records of the City Council. I think this is a photo op.
Yeah.
I'll hold it up.
That's right. You go. Cheers. All right.
Thank you. May I make
Anything
a
to say?
few parting comments? The strength of council is that we don't always agree, but we try to work together in a collaborative and respectful way, and I think that will continue with the new alderman, who I've known for some time, and he's a wonderful selection. So best of luck to you, Ted. I thank everyone on the council for everyone's participation in the process that makes this a better town always going forward. I made a mention of the staff, and the staff oftentimes makes what we do look kind of easy, but We have a wonderfully dedicated staff. I got a little bit of exposure to it with the Plan Commission, working with Kathy Zerniak, who's tremendously dedicated. But again, I always want to point out what a great staff we have, how respectful. And being on council for a few years, you learn a lot more about the depth of the city operation and how well-run this city is by the staff that we have on hand. So I want to thank the staff, and I might find it in my path to bring a cheesecake around every now and then, so not to worry. So thank you all.
And now I would entertain a motion to approve the resolution.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed? Motion carries. You're free to go.
Thanks very much.
Okay, and the next item on the agenda, I don't know if I want to do this, I should give Tim time to at least get down the stairs, but,
That could be a while.
yeah. Next item on the agenda is the appointment of Second Ward Alderman Edward Ted Notes Jr. I would ask the council for a motion to approve
So
his
moved.
appointment.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Ted, could you please step forward and be sworn in?
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Ted Notes,
Have been appointed to the office of Alderman
have been appointed to the office of Alderman
of the city of Lake
of the
Forest
city of Lake Forest,
in the county of Lake
county of Lake,
and the state of Illinois.
and the state of Illinois.
Do solemnly swear
Do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the state of Illinois,
and the Constitution of the state of Illinois,
and that I will discharge the duties of said office
and that I will discharge the duties of said office
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
Congratulations, Alderman Notes.
All right, watch out. Coming over. She stays.
She does?
Oh, I stay? I'm not coming over.
Okay. Okay.
Welcome aboard, Ted.
Thank you, George.
The next item on the agenda is one of the great honors that I have as mayor, and that is the swearing in of a new firefighter paramedic, Austin Yark. Proclamation is. Wait a minute, okay.
The frame. It's the frame.
Oh, okay.
That's what you, yeah, just read from that.
This is the oath.
Yep, that's.
I do that up here.
Yep.
Okay. It's a complicated agenda. Would you like to say a few words?
Honorable Mayor, members of council, thanks for having us here tonight to swear in one of our newest firefighters. I would like to bring Austin Yark and his wife Lori up, and I'd ask Austin's family to come in and the firemen that are waiting in the wings back there. I think this is the biggest crowd we've seen in a while here. I didn't know that we just had to put a oath of office in here for a fireman. But Austin comes to us with a lot of experience. He was already a certified firefighter and paramedic working in a neighboring town as a contract paramedic. And we also hired him back in August of 2017 as a paid on premise, a part-time firefighter. And this is just another success story of ours with another person coming from our part-time ranks to full-time. We're really glad to have Austin here. He's been a great addition to the department, and I'd love it if you'd swear him in and let his wife pin the badge on him.
Just bring him over. Bring him up. He can be there.
That works just fine.
It's a family affair.
That's a family deal.
I, Austin T. York, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
I, Austin T. York, solemnly do swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution and laws of the state of Illinois,
the Constitution and laws of the state of Illinois,
and the ordinances, rules, and regulations of the city of Lake Forest.
and the ordinance, rules, and regulations of the city of Lake Forest.
I will faithfully discharge the duties of the position of firefighter paramedic to the best of my ability.
I will faithfully discharge the duties of the position of the firefighter paramedic to the best of my ability.
I further swear to uphold the mission of the Lake Forest Fire Department and work to fulfill its vision to the best of my ability.
I further swear to uphold the mission of the Lake Forest Fire Department and work to fulfill its vision to the best of my ability.
We have a family.
Any other family members?
Mother,
Yeah. Mom?
Mom. Is that Mom?
Pretty cute.
If you're good with us being excused, we'd like to go back to the station and celebrate with Austin.
You're free to go.
Sounds good.
Congratulations and welcome. The next item on the agenda is the approval of a proclamation to declare October 10th, 2019 as World Mental Health Awareness Day. I'm going to read the proclamation first. I must say, with a little editorializing here, this is something that I have come to appreciate much more significantly as an issue in our community since I became mayor. You get a little different view of the police and fire calls when you're sitting in the mayor's chair than you do in any other role here, except maybe if you're the police chief or the fire chief or the city manager. This is a real issue in this community. The proclamation is as follows. Whereas approximately 1 in 5 individuals will experience a mental health challenge during the coming year, every 40 seconds, a life will be lost to suicide. And whereas the Lake Forest community is not immune to these sad statistics. And whereas during challenging economic times, many more will face transient emotional and psychological distress. And whereas this month, the City of Lake Forest stands with all those who seek to remove the stigma surrounding the diagnosis and treatment of mental health And this month, we speak to those with mental health challenges to let them know they are not alone and that seeking help is a sign of strength. And whereas we all have a role to play on World Mental Health Day. Now therefore, I, George Pandeleon, on behalf of the City of Lake Forest, hereby proclaim our support for World Mental Health Day on October 10th, 2019, by calling upon our community, government agencies, first responders, organizations, healthcare providers, and research institutions to share knowledge to reduce the stigma surrounding mental health, support suicide prevention, and assist our friends, neighbors, and families living with mental health challenges. Together, we can save lives. I would entertain a motion to approve the resolution.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Next item on the, well, there are two other things on my comments by mayor tonight. One is Alderman Beidler would like to make a couple of comments about a recent visioning session that we had for the Deer Path Road streetscape.
Thank you, Mayor Pantaleon. 6 nights ago, in this very room, the members of city staff and the, let me see if I can get this right, Deer Path Streetscape, I think we're an ad hoc committee, got together it was interesting because the chairs were kind of moved. There were some tables, there were posters. People gathered actually up here as well. The room was frankly packed, and the subject was, what do residents like about the Deer Path streetscape? What do they not like? Given that we're going to the state for a grant to try to improve it, what should be included in that plan? It was really a wonderful, it was very well orchestrated by the staff. Jim Lockefier, I don't know if Jim's here tonight, but he did a terrific job of coordinating it. Very well thought out, and volunteers from the ad hoc committee came, and everybody seemed eager to talk. We engaged people in conversation. They put sticky notes on things. Everybody got 5 red dots, and we could put those, we could bullet them, we could do it however we wanted with the thing we were most passionate about, whether it was trees or taking on the traffic situation or whatever. And it was it was useful. It was a wonderful gathering of people. People were candid, but it also, I felt like, really gave us some guidance. We're processing the input that we got, but I think it really gave us some guidance going forward. And I just want to say to those people who might be watching, who attended, we're so appreciative. We've had community gatherings for now both the comprehensive plan efforts on Waukegan Road and Route 60, and I think we're having the same response every time, that community input is incredibly valuable. So we encourage you, whenever there is a chance to do that, and everyone in the city hears about it because you get a postcard that tells you about these meetings, I urge you to come because it's an incredible way to engage with what's going on in your city. So that was a long thank you, but heartfelt.
Thank you. Thank you. And then Alderman Bushman would like to make some comments about an event that's coming up on Sunday.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And the event I'd like to advise you of and talk a little bit about is the auto show that's coming to Lake Forest. It's a special auto show. It's this Sunday, October 13th, 1 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's going to be at the Telegraph Road train station. For those that are not familiar with the train station, it's off of Waukegan Road, north of Everett. And there's plenty of free parking, free admission, so the price is right for this auto show. And why I say it's special is because it's going to have hand-selected vintage cars going back to the Model T. It's going to have luxury superstars of today in the automotive area. Here's a list of over 90 vehicles that are going to be shown. And it's all being put together by the Chamber of Commerce, Lake Forest, Lake Bluff Chamber of Commerce. Joanna Rawlick has been very much involved in this, and we want to thank her and the Chamber, also the participants and the sponsors that are here, and there was an organization committee that helped put this all together. And just again, to remind you, it's going to be at the Telegraph Road train station. There should be plenty of free parking there. and it's something to go to and see these vehicles. I think you'll be awed by some of them, maybe all of them. You may be a little envious. You may be there to buy, but in any event, we hope you do a little dreaming when you see all the vehicles and enjoy the event, and hope to see you there again this Sunday between 1 and 4 p.m.
Thank you, Ray. And I'll just add a little bit on top of that. The weather looks like it's not going to be raining. And it's going to be a nice brisk fall day, so it should be a beautiful event, beautiful backdrop for the event. And this is part of ongoing efforts to have events on the west side of town, too. So important move in that direction. So thank you, Ray, for bringing that up.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is comments by the city manager. Jason?
Great. Thank you, Mayor and members of council. Tonight I have the pleasure of introducing two individuals who are here to share important information with the community. First, last month, Lake County, in partnership with the United Way, launched a new 211 information and referral helpline for county residents seeking confidential health and human service assistance. Here tonight to share additional information about the scope and benefits of this new initiative is Lake County Board member and former Lake Forest Mayor, Mike Rummel.
Thank you, Jason, and thank you, Mayor, for giving me the time to speak tonight. A lot of people say, what do you do on the county board? And while we do a lot on the county board, there are a few things that can impact 700,000 people. This is one of those things. Your proclamation tonight was dead on as to what this is about. The 211 is a free one-stop shop help for everybody. It's easy to remember information and referral helpline. It reduces time and frustration with a central access point to health and human services in Lake County. It's always open, it's always confidential, and it's always free. I passed out a card to each one of you before the meeting as to what 211 is. There's cards in the back, and I'm going to leave some for you to have at City Hall for residents who need help. So it is open to everyone in Lake County. It's staffed by accredited, trained navigators to guide calls in a time of need. It accesses over 1,000 programs and services that are available in Lake County. It is confidential, as I said, and accessible 24/7, 365. The purpose is to make things work faster. Trying to call social service agencies, figuring out which one you should be at, directed. 1211 call will get you to where you need to go. And so that is the purpose of it, and it came about through having been finance chairman at the county for 5 years. This was a long process to get the funding, to work together with United Way, to be able to get this program off the ground. And there's a number of participants involved in it, and it really is, how do we help people? So giving you some examples, and I'm going to play a video, I hope, in a second, but some examples of how 211 can help. My electricity's off and I have a handicapped person in the house. What do I do? 211 will get you there. My grandmother can't live with me anymore. Where do I go? What's available? What services are there? My basement flooded and I need mold remediation. Who do I call? I need daycare for my babies. I'm looking for volunteer opportunities. My car broke down and I can't get to work. I need to get to doctor's appointments and I don't have a way to drive there. These are the services that are available. These are what we're trying to solve. So if you could. That's great. This is a short video we've created on what's available.
211, how may I help you? Hi, my husband has been hitting me. He did it again this morning. I need to get away from him, but I don't have any family near, so I don't know where to go. I'm sorry you're going through that. Are you in a safe place now? Do you need a doctor? No, but I need to get out of here now. Okay. I'm going to connect you directly to an advocate who can tell you about your options.
Mom and Dad live alone and don't drive anymore. They're not eating right because they don't go out. Look, I searched online, but I'm not sure what program will help them. Look, I work a lot and I don't have a lot of time to deal with this.
I hear you. Meals on Wheels might be the answer, and there are other resources. Let me get some more information from you so we can find what works.
Excellent. Thank you.
211, my name is Susan. How can I help you? I'm freaking out. I just found drugs on my son's desk. I'm sorry to hear that. How old is he? He's 16. He spends all his time in his room. He's quit all his sports. He's dropped all of his friends. He sleeps all the time. He may be dealing with several issues like dependency and depression. I can guide you to counseling for both.
211 helps residents, agencies, and providers based on a proven model. 211 is used around the entire country, and it will work here in Lake County as well. Resource navigators are caring individuals who are experienced, trained specialists, and over 90% are bilingual. You can connect to these available resources by phone, text, and website. Beyond identifying problems and providing information and referrals, specialists intervene in crisis situations and advocate on behalf of clients.
A Safe Place is the only provider in Lake County that is solely dedicated to serving victims of domestic violence and human trafficking. Making it faster and easier for residents to find help, it is crucial for individuals to have their needs met, and 211 will be instrumental on making this happen. 211 will help residents to find shelter and food and safety immediately, just by making a phone call or a simple text to ask for help.
211 is transforming the way United Way of Lake County helps thousands of our residents connect with essential health and human services. It's free, it's confidential, and it's available every day of the year, 24/7. 211 helps us better address critical needs in our community. It allows us to offer access to a wide range of resources in one place. It's faster, more convenient, more efficient, and less frustrating. That benefits not only residents, but also employers, nonprofit agencies, and service providers. We are so proud to bring 211 to Lake County. A big thank you to all of our partners who are helping us do this, because together we can better serve the critical needs of our community.
So I thank you for taking the time tonight to allow me to speak about this. This is something that I've personally been involved with, and we are on it launched live last week, as I told Jason, and we are on a 211 tour, so I'm leaving here to go to Deerfield, where we're presenting the same program at 7:30, but they have 340 people standing to testify on marijuana, so you're lucky that you're going to miss that one tonight. I also, on a personal note, want to congratulate Ted Notes. I believe I pointed him to some boards way back when, so it's great to see you up there. And Mayor, I'm taking one of your comments. You know, sometimes the spouses wait at home. Sometimes they just come here to find them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Well, that concludes, actually.
Oh, I got one more.
Got one more,
actually,
sorry.
Yeah.
Right.
So next, as was noted at our September 3rd City Council meeting, 2019 was a quadrennial year for property assessments throughout Lake Forest. So here tonight to discuss the assessment process and its impact on Lake Forest is Shields Township Assessor Scott Hilton.
Thank you, Jason. Mayor and members of the City Council, I want to thank you for letting me come here tonight to talk about the assessments. I think this might be the third time now that I've actually addressed the board. It was a different mayor at the time I came, George, but about 2019. Every 4 years, Lake County goes through a quadrennial reassessment. All the counties outside of Cook County are also going through a quadrennial reassessment this year, DuPage. When we do the quadrennial, that really lets us open up our books. If our land values are too high, that's our chance to make sure that they're correct. They were too high after I did reviewing of what land sales indicated. So this is our one chance every 4 years to reduce the different parts of your assessment on your properties. One of the things that happened for 19 that we thought was going to happen in 18 was the new computer system that's used in Lake County. It's called Tyler. Lake Forest, as we all know, is in 5 different townships. 3 of the townships that encompass Lake Forest are on the Tyler system. 2 of them, Libertyville and Vernon, have their own system. This sort of complicates the assessment process in that it doesn't hook up with the Board of Review and with the county as easily as the Tyler system does for the other 13 townships that are in Lake County. With the new Tyler system, we actually had to do a lot of conversions. We actually touched each of the 12,000 parcels in Shields Township this year to make them fit into the new Tyler system. The other thing that we do is we look at the qualified sales, and there's a 3-year weighted average sale price of the homes in the different neighborhoods. We have about 92 neighborhoods in Shields Township. About 35 are Lake Forest. And we go through the sales and try to make sure that our assessments are fair based on the information. I think as I start out talking to residents when they come to my office and my staff talks about is when you get your blue card, make sure the facts on that blue card are correct, because they were switched from the old ProVal system to the new Tyler system, and mistakes could have been made. When you come to the assessor's office, or if you come to the assessor's office, I think it's always important to point out the differences in your home compared to your neighboring homes. And it's not just, well, my house is a ranch and his is a 2-story. You try to compare with ranches, but you'll find that with the condition of your house, negative factors that are going to affect the value of your property, it's important to point that out to us, because a lot of times we're not aware of it until the homeowners come in and say, my house is over-assessed, it's too high. The difference too this year you're going to find is before you could have paper filings on your assessment complaints. This year everything has to be done electronically, and on your desk or on the dais we put a copy of the new how to file online. We have found that there are some seniors that don't have computers and things like that. And we've been actually doing it in my office when people come in and say, I don't have access to a computer, I don't have any children that can help me with this. So we've actually taken it upon ourselves to make sure that we help anybody to make sure that if they have or they want to file a complaint on their property, that they can do it at my office. When I was here about a year ago, we talked a little bit about you should start thinking about 19, and that was a year ago. And some people did. Most probably thought, well, I'll see what happens. But you know, the appraisers are getting really busy now, and a lot of people are calling for the appraisals. When you file your complaint, if you don't have the appraisal done yet, you can submit a complaint and say appraisal to follow if you've got an appraisal ordered for your property. I believe that the appraisals are generally the best evidence that you can have when you go to the Board of Review, because an appraiser's actually walked through the property. He knows that you don't have enough bathrooms, or he knows the condition of the house, or he'll see if the basement tends to flood, whatever the negatives might be, and can point that out in the report. And I think that's very important when you go through the quadrennial, because the appraised value that they come up with and whatever the Board of Review would decide is going to hold then for the next 4 years. So if the appraisal costs $400, it really is going to be like $100 a year to get that assessment reduction. So I think the appraisals are the strongest evidence that you can take to the Board of Review. You can do it on uniformity. The new computer system is, some people have said it's easy to use to find comparable houses to do a uniformity analysis. Others have said they get a little bit confused with it. So as I say, I think, you know, if your house is tremendously overassessed, I would recommend that an appraisal be your evidence that you're going to submit. We have been manning the phones, and we're at the office ready to help at any time we can with whoever calls and has a problem with with filing a complaint or has questions of our office. But as I said, I think the first thing you better do, or that owners should do, is review the property description, make sure that those numbers are correct, because that's going to be the square footage of your house is going to be one of the bases for, you know, what the correct market value would be for your property. The other thing that I'm finding as the assessor is that a lot of people don't really file for their exemptions. And there are a number of exemptions they qualify for. They're on the assessor's website, and I gave them to, once again, to all the members of the city council, and Biddy has them to hopefully put online for Lake Forest. So they'll be on your website, hopefully, so people can just make sure that their home's assessed at the correct number, and that they're getting all the exemptions that they might be entitled to. We have tried to stay in contact. I think we've met 3 times, or maybe more than that, with the city manager, with Elizabeth Holub, the finance director, with Jed, you know, to talk about, you know, what the impact was going to be with the value of the homes in Lake Forest. So we've tried to let everybody know exactly where we're going. I think people know the market. They recognize if you've got a ranch house that's probably in the $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 price range, that's a pretty strong value of property in Lake Forest right now. If your house is over $2 million, well, those values have come down considerably from, you know, what they once were, and they're on the market for a long time. I think the realtors, the last I talked, they thought there was a 6-year supply of homes on the market in the Lake Forest, Lake Bluff area, which makes the market tough right now. So, does anyone have a question?
When did the notices get mailed out, and how long do people have to file their?
Great question. The notices went out for Shields Township. Now, I have had people in Lake Forest call and say, I didn't get my blue card, and when they give me their PIN number, I go, well, that's because you live in Vernon Township. They're not out yet. Our notices for Shields went out on November 26th. September 26th. And the last day for filing with the Board of Review is October 28th. And I would advise anybody that's considering filing to the earlier and the quicker you get your complaint in, I think the better off you're going to be, because the Board of Review is going to be inundated with the other townships that are coming out also. Shields Township is not alone with the increases in some areas and the decreases. So there could be, you know, a number of complaints, and the Board of Review is going to probably have quite a job this year to get these things all reviewed.
Alderman Morris?
Right, I just wanted to comment that you haven't commented on all the work that you and your team did this year to review the properties, to make sure that the assessments were fair, and brought a level of professionalism to the office that has been impressive.
Thank you. I appreciate that a lot. I've got a great staff at my office. I have some new people on the staff. One of the things we did is we had to convert from the ProVal system to the new Tyler system. And the properties didn't just push a button and it went over to the Tyler system. A lot of it was buildings had to be redrawn. We had to recalculate how they were valued, because like a 1.5-story house now, or a Cape Cod, doesn't work as a 1.5-story house anymore. It's got to be done totally different, piece by piece. My staff also, besides just doing the conversion to the Tyler system, we went through every one of the neighborhoods. We started up in North Chicago and worked our way south. And we actually had to almost put a value on each one of the residential properties in Shields Township this year, one by one. And that's, my staff has spent an awful lot of time working on this. I'm very proud of them. I've got a great staff. Kelly, my chief deputy, has been there for over 30 years. She's been through several quadrennials. Her husband, Tom Cooprider, used to be the chairman of the Lake County Board of Review. So she's also got Tom and I've got Tom to fall back on when we have questions. So we've been very fortunate, I think, as we've gone through this process.
Yeah, I think the residents in Shield Township should be confident that they're going to get a fair evaluation on their property value.
They will get a fair evaluation. If we're wrong, we're gonna correct what we're wrong on. So that's not a question. And we've already been talking to people. As I said, we have had some elderly people came in that, you know, really couldn't do the stuff on the computer. And Andrea and Jill in my office will work with them to do that. kind of encourage them that, you know, if you can do it yourself, that's great. If they go, well, well, how about your children or your grandchildren? Your grandchildren can do it probably better than anybody. And, you know, just to make sure that they get their information filed correctly and on time. And as I said, October 28th is the last date to file, so don't miss that date for Shields Township.
Other questions for Scott? Okay, well, thank you very much for the update and for all the hard work to get this done, and the fair warning that in the effort to do all that hard work of converting during the middle of a quadrennial, there may have been a few things that didn't work
And there
right,
will be.
And there will inevitably be some homes that are not assessed properly, so be vigilant out there and pay attention and get your appeal in before October 28th.
Correct. And we already have been doing field checks on homes, and they've, my staff has come back and said, oh, you know what, this is a finished basement. When it transposed, you know, or it was an unfinished basement, and we had it transposed as a finished basement, and that, you know, it makes it fair, and that's what we're trying to do, just be fair.
And I guess just for the moment, to clarify for people, the whole process starts with the levy, which is the amount of money we need to run the city and the school district and all the other entities. So the assessment process is really about who, you know, what percentage each homeowner pays of that levy. And so if you are over-assessed, you're gonna be paying more than your fair share of the overall cost. So it doesn't change, and if values go down, the tax rate's going to go up, or vice versa. If values go up, the tax rate is likely to go down because the levy is what it is. The amount of money we need to run the city is what it is. So this is all about making sure that you are paying the correct amount for the value of your home vis-a-vis your neighbors.
And what we really paid attention to, Mayor, thanks for those comments, but what I've really tried to pay attention to is that the other towns, you know, we've got North Chicago, Lake Bluff, Knollwood, and Lake Forest. We want to make sure that all the towns are assessed as accurately as possible, so some towns not at the lower end and not carrying their fair share on, and the underlying assessed value, that's, you know, to make sure that everybody's paying their fair share, so.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, thanks for letting me come up.
Thanks for the advice and the input.
Thank you,
Further
Scott.
comment
Alderman
before we
Morris,
go?
yes.
I wanted to thank the city manager and Director Thomas and Director Swarthout. I wasn't here for the dedication of the Hughes Gateway and the North Beach Access Road, but it's a tremendous achievement. It's fabulous, the work that they did and how hard they worked. I've been down there at 6:30 on a Friday night, and they're just coming off the job. They did a super job, and Cliff Miller and Keno also, for what they got done in that period of time and the way it's been finished is spectacular. So thank you to the city staff.
Without piling on, I'll say some things I've said before. We went from a landslide in June of 2018, 15 months later. I mean, when the landslide happened, we didn't have any money, we didn't have a plan, this was not on our radar screen, it wasn't in the budget, and it was a $2.5 million project that required a lot of engineering, a lot of planning, a lot of money raising, and it got done in 15 months, and that's staggering. And if you go down there, it's fabulous. It's just beautiful. Massive improvement in the quality of the whole experience going down to the beach. So thanks for bringing that up. The next item on the agenda, we don't have any committee reports tonight, so is opportunity for citizens to address the city council on non-agenda items. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address the city council on an item that is not on our agenda tonight? There being none, I would move on to items for omnibus vote consideration. We have 10, so bear with me as I read them. First is approval of the September 3rd, 2019 City Council meeting minutes. Second is approval of the September 16th, 2019 City Council workshop meeting minutes. Third is approval of the check register for the period of August 24th to September 30th, 2019. Fourth is approval of a First Amendment to the restated agreement relating to the Gorton property. Number 5 is approval of agreements with Sentinel Technologies for a data security assessment and Center for Internet Security for ongoing vulnerability monitoring. Number 6 is approval of a one-year contract renewal with Interdev for information technology support. Number 7 is approval of the revised Geographic Information System Consortium membership agreement. Number 6 is consideration of an ordinance approving a recommendation from the Building Review Board, first reading, and if desired by the City Council, final approval. 9th is consideration of a recommendation from the Plan Commission in support of tentative and final approval of the Mayflower Ravine re-subdivision and approval of the associated special use permit, if desired by the City Council, waive first reading and grant final approval of the ordinance. And number 10 is consideration of a template for a master pole attachment agreement for small wireless facilities, which is an approval by motion. Are there any items on here that any member of the council would like to pull out and either remove or have taken separately?
I wouldn't want to take it out, but I want to emphasize the criticality of number 5. That's the cyber security. There's been a huge surge in cybersecurity incidents from Baltimore down to small hamlets and healthcare hospitals, where the hacker takes your data, locks it up, and you have to send them 200 bitcoins to get it back. And so Director Holub and Director Gabinski have been working on this. 2 years ago they started, and this is an update, and it's absolutely critical that we secure this data so that we're not going to get hacked. So just an update for the council.
I had several questions about item number 4, the Gorton Agreement. I don't know if is this first and final reading of this, or where are we on this matter?
The only reading.
This is the only reading?
This is something that's been working its way through
Oh, I know.
PPL for some time.
I know. But we had a little kerfuffle with it before, so this is the first time that I've seen the entire agreement, and I had some comments about it. If you would, I have several. One of my main questions is, first of all, the term of this agreement is 33 years with an automatic extension for another 33 years. Is that correct, and why might that be?
If you look at the red line, you can see that there hasn't been any change to the term of the agreement. It's when it was first entered into, it was 33 years, so we have not changed that. That was 33 years from, let's see, 2013 when the agreement was first entered into.
No, I understand. I know there wasn't really that much changed in this, but it's also, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's been my understanding that this is going to be used as somewhat of a template for other organizations in the city, and so I just wanted to understand why we're doing some of the things that had been agreed to before in this agreement. So we really don't know, I guess.
An answer as to why initially it was 33 years,
Well, it just
don't.
seems like an odd number, and then there's like an automatic renewal for another 33 years.
Just to clarify, this is the agreement between the Gorton Foundation and the City of Lake Forest. Gorton is the operator of the facility. The city owns the facility. So this is basically an operating agreement.
Right.
And honestly, I was involved in this, and I don't remember why we had a 33-year term. But, anything can be revisited at any time. Obviously, it hasn't been 33 years since this document was agreed to in the first place. As a practical matter, what has occurred is the city had a responsibility to have the greater of 1/3, I think, representation, or 5 members on the Gorton board. And those positions were there, or put there, to make sure, and those, by the way, those positions also serve in the Finance and Operations Subcommittee. So those positions are there with the idea that the city has a seat at the table when decisions are being made about allocation of resources, particularly with respect to the facility. Because I can tell you with some deep personal experience, that didn't happen in the past, and as a result, Gorton went broke. But we went from having a separate city commission or board. And so Gorton had basically two masters. They had their fundraising committee and their operating committee. That got merged out of necessity because of just being a difficult operating situation. And now we are finding that there doesn't need to be 5 members from the city on the Gorton board. It's somewhat difficult to recruit and retain those people, and they can have the same level of oversight and effectiveness if there are 3 people, but they are assigned to these critical subcommittees.
And so
That's the basic story.
right. So how many people are on the Gorton board currently, and what percentage of those are city, that was the change, that was an amendment.
There are about 21, and so we were gonna have to come up with 7 to have 1/3. It's way too many.
And so the reason for the change was,
Reduce the demand on, the caucus has to come up with those members. Finding caucus people, 7 of them to serve on the committee, the board, was overwhelming. So let's reduce it down and make it consistent and similar to the other board members in terms of duties and length of term and such.
I'm not objecting to it, I
No,
just didn't
that's-
know,
yeah.
I just didn't have the history of it.
It's long.
And, I'm just trying to do my due diligence here with an agreement that I hadn't seen before. And then I also had a question about agreements with tenants, and why we aren't asking, I saw an indemnification agreement that embedded in here for the tenants, but I didn't see that they're required to hold any insurance to back up that indemnification agreement. And, as we all know, without that, and some of these tenants are not-for-profits to begin with, so an indemnification agreement isn't gonna be worth the paper it's written on. So I would like to have an explanation for why that isn't in there, or perhaps it should be in there. I'm
Mr.
afraid
Mayor,
these
point of order,
questions
please.
might go on
There's
for
a
while.
motion in front of the council to vote on this omnibus. If Alderman Rummel would like to pull that and set it up for another date, let's do that. But rather
We
than,
can pull it and
rather than
discuss it
burden
afterwards.
ourselves with this discussion, yeah, why don't?
Or just pull it for another date, because maybe the village attorney and city attorney and I need to have this discussion, because I'm afraid I have about 11 points, and I don't think we
this
all
is not
want
the
to go
place to
through
do
this
that.
now.
Right.
So, let's do that.
Okay, so we'll pull item number
4.
4. And I would entertain a motion, unless there are other items that others would like to see addressed separately? Okay, in that case, I would entertain a motion to approve the now 9 items for omnibus consideration. And then we'll bring back the Gorton at the next meeting after Alderman Rummel has had a chance to understand all the details.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Is this a roll call?
Mr. Mayor, can I have a roll?
Roll
Alderman,
call?
Alderman Beidler?
Aye.
Alderman Morris?
Aye.
Alderman Rummel?
Aye.
Alderman Notes?
Aye.
Alderman Preschlack?
Aye.
Alderman Goshgarian?
Aye.
Alderman Bushman?
Aye.
7 yea, 0 nay, motion carries.
Okay, as amended, right?
As amended.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is ordinances, and the first is consideration of a recommendation from the Plan Commission in support of approval of an update to the comprehensive plan as it relates to the Waukegan Road Settlers Square Business District and the surrounding area. This has been reviewed previously by the City Council, and this is the second and final reading. And
Thank you,
Kathy
Mr.
Cerniak is going to remind us about this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. You are correct. This was reviewed by the council at your first meeting in September. At that time, I gave a more extensive presentation. We talked about what is a comprehensive plan. We talked about the process to date, the fact that both a working group and a plan commission, and the plan commission was involved in the document that's presented to you. We reviewed the fundamental concepts, land use designations, and infrastructure and circulation recommendations which were forwarded to you. I don't plan to talk through all of those in detail. I do want to review that, again, in early September, you did grant first reading. At that time, the council stated agreement with the fundamental concepts, land use designation, desired outcomes. After your first reading, Alderman Bushman did provide staff with some recommended wording changes. Those are reflected in your packet in black line. So you can see that the text that was changed really emphasized primarily that we really want to strive for a balance between retail and non-retail businesses in the Waukegan Road Business District. The council at that time also endorsed next steps. So tonight, if you choose to do so, it will be appropriate for you to grant final approval of the ordinance. The ordinance actually adopts an amendment to the chapter of the comprehensive plan relating to the Waukegan Road and Settlers Square Business District. The recommendation is to approve a motion directing next steps as recommended. Very quickly, just to review the fundamental concepts that are included in the plan, really increase the customer base for the Waukegan Road Business District, and doing that by encouraging some mixed-use development as properties become available for redevelopment, by increasing the residential density opportunities in the area, again, working to strike the proper balance between retail and non-retail, focusing on low-impact uses that don't negatively impact the surrounding residences, either from a public safety, noise, lighting, traffic, industrial-type use, impact. Recognize that the Waukegan Road corridor is a transportation corridor, both for vehicles and for trains. Encourage partnerships, establish an identity, and encourage special events. As Alderman Bushman mentioned, there is a special event near the train station this weekend. Very quickly, this is Waukegan Road, the railroad tracks, the pink area, which includes Sunset and properties to the south, the property on the southwest corner of Everett and Waukegan Road, and the city-owned property on the northwest corner of Telegraph and Everett Road. Those areas are identified opportunity areas for mixed use as redevelopment occurs, incorporating some residential there. Residential property that's vacant, a 10-acre property, was identified as an opportunity for increased residential density. Just to review the recommended next steps that came from the Plan Commission, in addition to the recommendation in support of the comprehensive plan, direct a review of the B1 zoning district, really looking at the uses, which uses should be permitted outright, should uses be special uses? If so, what should those special use criteria be? What should the process be? Looking at the opportunity for incentives, looking at the opportunity to establish performance standards, such as we have for our restaurants in the code, to really streamline the process for those petitions that really meet the intent of the comprehensive plan. Second recommended step is to direct staff to engage IDOT in discussions about really considering improvements to crosswalks, whether there can be design features that really help to reduce speed. Community events, which I mentioned, direct the Property and Public Lands Committee to begin looking at the property, the city-owned property on the northwest corner of Telegraph and Everett Roads, to determine whether now is the right time to pursue some development opportunities there, and to direct staff, upon approval of the comprehensive plan, about the changes made to the comprehensive plan. So again, tonight we are asking for your final approval of the ordinance. The ordinance is included on page 143 of your packet. And second, a motion to direct the next steps as I've just outlined. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Questions or comments from the council for Kathy at this point? Alderman Bushman?
At our last meeting, where we did have the first reading, I did indicate 5 areas that I thought it would be helpful to expand on, recognizing that the document that we're looking at here is very important from a couple perspectives. One is the document that's going to provide guidance where we go from here in terms of our zoning code and other modifications that we're going to make in that area. And it also is going to be a basis for interpretation down the line as to what we're really intending to do here, both from a development standpoint and also, I think, from a legal standpoint. If you're ever challenged, they do look at times the comprehensive plan, whether it supports the position of the council. Kathy was very obliging to redline, at least in my document, the changes that incorporate the concepts that I have. They're consistent with everything that was done by the Plan Commission and the task force before them, but it emphasizes the importance of trying to maintain the vitality of the district and doing things that will hopefully achieve success there, both for the businesses and for the community at large, and obviously then for the city.
Thank you. Thanks for your input.
I
Other
just-
comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Kathy, thank you for running a great process. And thank you to everybody that participated in the working group. Again, this is a lot of behind-the-scenes activity, but it's a really important process in our community development process. And this comprehensive plan is really important. I think the city and the staff do a great job. And I'd like to thank former Alderman, I think it was Mike Edelman who was the chair?
Yes,
That's right.
Mike
So
Edelman.
thank you, Mike. It's really important that everybody gets together in the community to have a voice on what is the strategic land use for the different pockets of our community that can be improved over time, or if there's changes in the market or the conditions or the neighborhood. So I really, really appreciate that, and I'm very supportive of this in the next step, so thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Other comments? Okay. Any members of the public would like to comment on this matter before us? Okay. There being none, I would entertain a motion to grant final approval of an ordinance updating the city's comprehensive plan as it relates to the Waukegan Road Settlers Square Business District and the surrounding area, and to approve a motion directing the Plan Commission and the city staff to undertake a review and recommend updates to the B1 Neighborhood Commercial Zoning District to align this portion of the zoning code closely with the vision and desired outcomes as described in the comprehensive plan update, to direct the city staff from various departments to pursue opportunities to increase the visibility of crosswalks in the Waukegan Road Settlers Square Business District and surrounding area, and directing the staff to continue efforts to plan and encourage community events in the Waukegan, Everett, Telegraph Road area. I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Point of clarification, if I could, the motion for approval of the plan is with the edits that we've been talking about and have been incorporated as red line?
Correct.
Thank you. I'd make that motion to approve.
Okay.
Second.
I have a second from Alderman Morris, and I would have a roll call vote.
Alderman Beidler?
Aye.
Alderman Morris?
Aye.
Alderman Rummel?
Aye.
Alderman Notes?
Aye.
Alderman Preschlack?
Aye.
Alderman Gashagarian?
Aye.
Alderman Bushman?
Aye.
7 yea, 0 nay, motion carries.
Thank you. I'm going to editorialize just a bit about this process. This is, as other people have said, a very important effort that we're undertaking, and was started by my predecessor, Mayor Lansing, to really go through some of the critical zones within the community, neighborhoods and areas within the community, to make sure that our comprehensive plan and our zoning code subsequent to the comprehensive plan updates reflects the will of the community, and also has the appropriate focus on vitality and appearance and so forth, the things that we want in these neighborhoods. This was the very first, and it sets a pattern of community involvement in this process. This is a big step forward because we now have a pattern and a process. We've got the first area taken care of. Route 60 is going to come next. And then I believe the next thing after that, and I think this may be the most important of all, is an overall look at our zoning code from the standpoint of housing throughout the entire community. And I think that's something that we really have to step back and take a look at, given the current market conditions we're dealing with and the trends we're seeing, both demographically, socially, and economically, and some of the environmental challenges that we have with the state and local governments of the city of Chicago. So this is a big step forward. Thank you, everybody, for all the work that you've done on it. You've set a great example for the next rounds of the complete sort of comprehensive review of the comprehensive plan. So, job well done. Thank you. And thank you, Kathy, for leading the charge. You always do these things so well. The next item on the agenda is consideration of a recommendation from the Legal Committee in support of amending Chapter 40 entitled Government Ethics of the City Code. If desired by the City Council, waive first reading and grant final approval of the ordinance. Our City Attorney, Julie Tappendorf, is going to present this, but before she does, I'd like to provide a little background. In July of 2018, so 16 months ago, the Legal Committee was asked to review the city's ethics ordinance, of which a comprehensive review had not been done since its original adoption in 2004, in an effort to ensure statutory compliance and applicability. The committee met 5 separate times to discuss the ordinance, and even established a subcommittee made up of Chairman Dale Talkey, who I believe is here tonight, and Alderman Melanie Rummel, which met an additional 4 times to review, amend, and discuss the application of the proposed amendments. In total, members of the Legal Committee spent close to 16 months on this charge and had innumerable meetings, and that doesn't count all the side conversations and emails and wordsmithing and counter-wordsmithing and counter-wordsmithing and back and forths that took place. We have a legal committee with some excellent legal minds on it, and this has been very carefully thought through, I can assure everybody. The proposed amendments articulate and reflect the high level of interest, engagement, and expertise that have been provided by members of the Legal Committee and is brought forward for review and consideration by the City Council tonight. City Attorney Julie Tappendorf has prepared a brief presentation to review the substantive changes that are being proposed, which seek to make the ordinance more reader-friendly, ensure statutory compliance, and incorporate local conflicts of interest. After Attorney Tappendorf has completed her presentation, we will entertain questions or clarifications by the council if needed, and also questions or clarifications from members of the public if desired. So, Julie?
Thank you, Mayor.
Take care.
Members of the City Council, I will be brief, although obviously the amount of work that's gone in, I think the mayor did a good job in summarizing this, but it was over a year of many, many meetings, in just kind of summarizing up here some of the dates that we started this in July of 2018, and it really was a charge for the Legal Committee to take a look at the current ethics ordinance in the city code, and the charge was to streamline it, make it more reader-friendly, make sure it was consistent and is consistent with state statute, but also to look at ways where the city might tighten things up a little bit and have stricter regulations on a local scale than what the state statute does. So one of the first charges that I had as city attorney was to compile some examples from nearby communities. We looked at Glencoe, we looked at Highland Park, I think we looked at Winnetka, and remember the main 2 were Glencoe and Highland Park. Their ethics regulations were fairly new, fairly recent, so we thought that they were good examples. And so the first thing we did was look at a chart to compare Lake Forest regulations with state statute, but also in comparison to some of these other communities' regulations. After that, and after a meeting, I put together a draft changes, revised ordinance to get the discussions going with the legal committee in a red line format. So although, as you can see when you look at the red line, it's sort of hard to follow because we reorganize so much to try to make more sense for the reader, for the employee, for the official, for members of the public to find what they're looking for. But the first draft was presented in January, and then a subcommittee was appointed, as the mayor said. We met quite a few times to go over, and we went page by page, section by section through the changes until it came back to the legal committee. And finally, in July, the legal committee voted unanimously to present this to the city council. So that's what's in front of you, is the legal committee's recommended draft. So I mentioned reorganization. That was one of the key things. The first thing that we did was to reorganize the chapter into what we thought made more sense and did make it more reader-friendly. First, the general provisions, the policy and purpose. You can see in the red line that we did make some changes, mainly to streamline and try to make it a little less legalese. Even though this was a group of all lawyers, the thought was let's make it, again, more reader-friendly and take out some of the legalese language. But we also added a section to make sure that it was clear that the policies that are in here aren't intended to govern every single circumstance that you could come up with, but the purpose of this and the intention of the city is to have officials and employees exercise good judgment in working for the city. So that was something that we added. On the definitions, there were a lot of changes made, not just in the organization, but also in the key definitions under the code. Probably the largest, two most significant changes were to the definition of financial interest and to the definition of relative. And the main reason to change the definition of financial interest was to make it consistent with state law. There are numerous cases that look at conflicts of interest for government officials in the state. And so there are dozens and dozens of cases where the term financial interest has been defined over time. It's not set out in state statute where you can cut and paste it, but it's been set out in common law in these cases, and how the Illinois Supreme Court and the appellate courts interpret this for purposes of conflicts of interest of government officials. So we use that definition in all of these cases to make sure that our ethics code was up to date. The definition of person was expanded to make sure it could cover any type of individual, organization, trust. So that was an expansion somewhat. Employee was made clear, not just the employees that are actual employed with the city, but also potentially a contract employee, somebody that might be hired through, let's say, temp, like GovHR or GovTemp USA. We've had that situation at the city before. We wanted to make sure if somebody is filling an employee position, even if it's by contract, that they're governed by the same rules. And then the definition of relative. We spent, and Alderman Rummel can attest to this, and Chair Tauke, we spent a lot of time on the definition of relative, multiple meetings talking about the balance between trying to cover situations that could create a true conflict of interest under the city code, but not be so broad that in a community with a sense of volunteerism and engagement of its government officials, that would not make it so difficult for somebody to serve on a board or commission or on the council. And so I can't emphasize how much time we spent on, should we have this relative, should we count this? So the definition that we have in here, as you can see, it was simplified to a spouse, parent, sibling, child, grandparent, or grandchild, or spouse of any parent, sibling, child, grandparent, or grandchild of the officer or employee. It is streamlined from what was in there before, but there was a rhyme and reason for that, and there was a lot of time spent on the definition of relative. And it's important to understand from the state, and we'll talk about the statutory conflicts of interest when we get to that section, but it's important with this definition of relative to understand that under state law, there is no family member or relative or spousal conflict of interest for government officials. The government, the state statute conflicts of interest only apply to the interest of the official or the employee, period. There is no imputing a conflict of interest if the employee or the official's spouse has a conflict. That doesn't exist under state law, and there's a lot of cases on that. Our code, the city's proposed code, is stricter than that, and that was intentional, that the legal committee wanted to have that, to have a stricter code of conflicts of interest in the city. So a few more of the general provisions. None of these and the issues about disclosing confidential information, impartiality, special treatment of others, use of city property or services, annual disclosure statements and reporting, all of these are within the general provisions before we get to the conflicts of interest. And while it looks like there were a lot of changes, there really weren't any substantive legal changes. We did reorganize it, we streamlined it, we tried again to take out the legalese, but the substantive regulations that exist today are relatively unchanged. So unless somebody has questions at the end on this, we didn't make a lot of changes to this. It's consistent with what the city's regulations are right now. Where we made the most changes and where we spent, besides the definition of relative, where we spent probably the most time were the two sections on conflicts of interest. And they're separated into the statutory conflicts of interest, which is in section 4010, and then the local conflicts of interest. And as I mentioned, the statutory conflicts of interest are what they are. They're in state statute. They're set out in the Illinois Municipal Code and in the state conflicts of interest section. And they apply to non-home rule and home rule alike. So whether or not, or charter community, that these are the statutory conflicts of interest. And currently, the city's code of ethics, its ordinance, doesn't get into the statutory conflicts of interest. They're not in here. And one of the things that we talked about at the legal committee was to have a one-stop shop for employees and officers in looking at the code of ethics to really understand what those rules, what the parameters are, instead of having to go to state statute and then come back to the local ordinance. So we did add the statutory conflicts of interest directly into the ordinance. We did not word for word use the exact language from the statute, because as you can imagine, it's not the easiest to read. We tried to make it a little more reader friendly again, but we did incorporate the main regulations for conflicts of interest under a state statute. The important distinction between statutory conflicts of interest and the local is under the statutory conflicts of interest, if you have an interest as a city official that falls under a statutory conflict of interest, it's not something, unless there's an exemption, it's not something you can simply recuse yourself or abstain from voting. It is a disqualifying conflict of interest that either disqualifies you from office entirely, or you have to divest of the interest that would fall under the conflict of interest. Because the statutory conflicts of interest are, the remedy, so to speak, is so draconian, the statutory conflicts of interest are actually pretty narrow. and we talked about that at the legal committee, they're fairly narrow in scope. Again, no relative interest or spousal interest or friend interest. It needs to be a direct interest of the official or employee. It needs to be financial, so pecuniary in nature. You have to get something for this, and something that you would have to, again, either step down from the business or the contract, not bid for a contract, or step down from office. And the general conflicts include, let's say, being an owner of a company, an example, being an owner of a company that contracts directly with the city for services. That's a statutory conflict of interest. If you're the owner, you're getting a financial benefit by contracting with the city. You either need to step down from your position at the city, or not contract with the city. Similar, purchasing city property, the sort of work or business, some kind of direct financial interest with the city would disqualify you. There are a number of exceptions from the statutory conflicts of interest, as you would expect, because they are pretty significant. There are exceptions that would allow you to have an ownership interest in mutual funds in a company that comes before the city for business, so you're not disqualified for office for having some investments if they're fairly minor in nature. A small ownership interest in a business, for whatever reason, there's an exemption for bank employees, but not other employees. So if you work for Chase and Chase comes in for zoning relief, you don't have to step down. There's an exception for that. We talked about this a few months ago. There's also an exception for service on a nonprofit board. And the distinction is, one, if you are appointed by the city council to serve on that board, then you're allowed to vote. If you are not appointed by the city council, so this is a position that you hold in your personal life to be on a nonprofit board, then you have to abstain from the vote if something comes up. These are some of the exceptions that would not disqualify you from office, but would allow you to stay in your position, both on the city council and with the business or with the company or the nonprofit board, so long as you follow the procedures in state statute. And I always advise my clients, if you ever have a question about whether or not you have a statutory conflict, that's when you should give me a call, send me an email, and let's talk about it. It's not a situation that you want to guess at. Either it is a conflict and we need to find a way to either find an exception or divest yourself, or it's not a conflict, and then you can feel comfortable saying, I've run it by legal and I feel confident that I can either vote on it or recusal is sufficient. And the procedures are different for each type of exception under the statute. So something to be aware of. It's not something that you want to try to muddle through yourself, and feel free to contact. The bigger issue for the city council, because there's nothing you can do about the statutory conflicts of interest. So the language in here, it is what it is under state law, but the local conflicts of interest are something that each individual community can control, because while you can't be less strict than state statute, you can be more strict. Currently, the city has stricter regulations on local conflicts of interest. They were a little hard to follow and understand, which is one of the reasons why we worked on some new language to try to make it a little easier for officials and employees to know what the rules are. In essence, and sort of summarizing it, the local conflicts of interest in 4011 basically extend the statutory conflict of interest to an interest that an officer or employee's relatives would have. That would be the situation where, while state statute would not prohibit if your wife owned a company or your husband owned a company and wanted to contract with the city for the spouse's business wanted a contract with the city, that under state statute, that's perfectly fine. But our local rules would say that in that situation, it is a local conflict of interest. It would not disqualify you from office because it's a local, not a statutory, but you would have to disclose the interest and refrain from participating in the discussion and the vote. So that is the specific changes on the local conflicts of interest, again, is to extend those conflicts of interest to the relatives. The other provisions, the other substantive provisions in the ordinance are also statutory, similar to the statutory conflicts of interest. We didn't make a lot of changes to the gift ban regulations because they haven't really changed much since the state statute has incorporated it. I think there was one small change to the exemptions. But in essence, the gift ban, the State Gift Ban Act prohibits officials and employees from accepting gifts from prohibited sources. And we look at a prohibited source as somebody that wants to do some business with the city, either is doing or wants to do business. So a vendor, a contractor, somebody coming to the city for some approval. If they were to offer some gift that didn't fall within the exemptions, then that would violate the State Gift Ban Act and also the local ordinance. There are a number of exemptions. These come up usually for food and refreshments. So if one of your vendors provides cookies at the end of the year sends them to the city, it's less than $100 in the year, that's fine. There's some minimal, used to be golf. When this first was adopted many years ago, and that was a state legislative exemption, and they got a lot of flack for that. So golf is no longer an exemption under the Gift Ban Act. But there are some obvious minor gifts that you can accept that would not create a Gift Ban Act situation. The other section, substantive regulation, is prohibited political activities. Again, this is state statute, so we just incorporated the language right from the statute. Political activities, basically it would be using city resources or staff to advocate for either a campaign or a referendum, so a candidate for a campaign or a referendum. So you couldn't use the city copier for election materials or use city staff to send out election materials. I mean, these are pretty obvious prohibitions in state law. So we just incorporated and made sure that they're consistent with the current act. There were a couple of changes since the city's ordinance in 2004 that we wanted to update. The last couple of things relate to administration and enforcement. Currently, the city manager serves as the ethics officer. We didn't make any changes there. That's pretty consistent with what other communities do. Then the city council serves as the ethics commission. So the ethics officer provides the day-to-day guidance on these issues, obviously with consultation of the city attorney. If there's a question about interpretation of the ethics ordinance or conflicts of interest, if there's a complaint filed, and in the 15 years that this ordinance has been around, my understanding is there has not been an ethics complaint that would fall under the ordinance. But if there were an ethics complaint filed, that the city council would serve as the ethics commission to hear that complaint. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that, again, we spent some time on, probably one entire meeting, was what is the process for that complaint? And the current process that's in place right now was very complicated and very hard to follow. And it bounced back between the city council and the audit committee. It really wasn't clear that there was a good process, that if somebody were to file a complaint, that they understood, here's where I file, this is where it's going to go, this is the timing, this is what the city council will do. And that was a big change for us, was to make it as simple as possible for the complainant to understand what the procedure is, but also for the city to follow the procedure, to understand the timing for moving the complaint forward, the Ethics Commission notifying the parties, both parties that are involved, the officer or the employee that's the subject of the complaint and also the complainant, and follow that process through. So that was a pretty significant change to the process to, I think, make it much easier to follow. And then last, the penalties in the ordinance were sort of all over the place, and we wanted to consolidate them into one place that made sense. So in the last two sections of the ordinance, we've put in the reference to the general penalty. So if there were a fine for a violation, it refers back to the city's regular ordinance general penalty. But we also put in the penalties that could apply under state statute. Under state statute, if the city council enters into a contract that violates the statutory conflicts of interest, the state says that that contract is void. So that language is in there, and potential if it's a city employee to discipline, and also to have penalties if somebody were to file a frivolous complaint. So these are pretty standard. We've seen these in other communities and other ordinances as well. And that is about as brief as you can get for a for a 1 year long process of amending this ordinance. But I'm happy to take questions.
Well, thank you, Julie. Questions from the city council?
Can I just make a comment? I just want to emphasize again the amount of effort that went into revising this ordinance and the thought that went into it, and to praise the chairman of the legal committee, Dale Talkie, for all of the work he put into this, and Julie Tappendorf as well. It was really a joy to work with these people on this ordinance, because they were so thoughtful and just so willing to do it, which is not an easy thing to draft an ordinance almost from scratch. I mean, that original ordinance truly was lacking. And I also want to emphasize the importance of this. I think that the very integrity of government and public confidence in that government is laid out in this document. I mean, it's fairly arcane to go through, but it's so important. I don't think there's a more important document to any city than your ethics ordinances and your conflict of interest ordinances. And that's what this is. And so I hope we all read it carefully, study it. I hope also that we find a way to incorporate this into our, when we talk to new aldermen who are coming in, when we talk to new staff members. I hope this is a living document that's reviewed with those individuals. I like to think that most people coming into these positions have gotten to this position because they have a sense of integrity and ethics, but it's also something that is violated, hopefully not here in Lake Forest, but by other governments around the country and in unfortunately other communities, and it never hurts for everyone to be reminded of it, and every time you think, oh, I'm glad that I remembered that. And so I really hope that in our inauguration of new city council members, new board and commission members, we will maybe be able to abbreviate this document and do a quick review of it with all those people, so that it is a living document that truly impacts the integrity of our local government. So thank you to the legal committee. It's a good thing we didn't have to pay you at your hourly rate for all of the hours that were put into this, or we'd have to have a separate item on the budget just for that. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I think that's a really good segue to my comment. I think one of the amazing things about our city is we have such rich talent that are involved in these committees that work for free. And the boards and commissions and the city council work together very well, and the staff does a very, very excellent job of facilitating all of this work behind the scenes, and it culminates to get to our desk here. And I really, really want to applaud that, and I also want to caution all the aldermen to resist the urge to dive in and relitigate after all that work and all that expertise that was brought to bear on this important ordinance. I think we have to understand it. We also have to appreciate the intricacies of it, and I think you did a great job going over it. But I really want to credit Alderman Rummel and the legal subcommittee that did all the hard work here. And it's easy to read it and say things are covered, and I feel very confident that it's clear and articulate, and it's something that can be passed around, and it will have a big impact on an orientation to a new alderman and a reminder to us. So I really thank you for all the hard work.
I would say thank you as well. Dale, I'm glad you're here as a volunteer. This is a great example of the just the way Alderman Preslak mentioned, the combination of people coming together to get a job done. Julie, I would say to Melanie's suggestion of sort of a cheat sheet for new people coming in, the presentation you just made. I mean, I read through this. I even had a conversation earlier today with the city manager trying to unpack a couple of things, because this is not, I mean, I know it was improved, but it's still a lot of legal language, which is important, and obviously if it's the state statute, it has to be that. I thought your summary was fantastic, so I think if we use that as an accompanying document to remind ourselves what's here, and then, you know, I was following you on the language as you were doing it, but it was incredibly helpful to have that kind of summary statement. So let's just use that. She's done that for us. Let's use it. We've got it. We've already got the Cliff Notes. So thank you for that. Really, very reassuring to have this. Thank you.
Okay. Alderman Bushman.
I agree with much of what's been said, that it's an excellent document. A lot of work has gone into it. It's an important document, but it's something that I don't agree with that we should not delve into. We should not, as our responsibility is, to be the ones who make the final decision as to what the language should be. By way of background, this is the first time I think many of us on the council saw the document and recognized all the hard work that went into it. But I did take the time to delve into it. I felt that that was my responsibility. And I'll give you a little background. I did spend 6 years on the legal committee, most of those years as chairman. Dale was my successor on that committee, and I think very highly of him. But that doesn't preclude, you know, another set of eyes looking at it, raising some questions. And also, I have for almost 2 decades now been an arbitrator for the financial industry and recognize the importance of conflict of interest and having a process that, you know, does not have any conflicts or what I'll call the appearance of impropriety. And I think that's important for a community like ours, and we should be emphasizing that. So after having a chance to review the document, I did put together 5 comments. I did share it with Jason, and I asked the city manager in turn to share it with the council so they would have the opportunity of seeing my thought before tonight's meeting. And I won't spend a lot of time, but the one important area, I think they're all important, but the first area is the definition of relative. One thing that the council should be aware of is it has changed. It's changed to a much narrower definition, that we're no longer looking at a father or mother-in-law who's a spouse's parents. We're no longer looking at a brother or sister-in-law who's a spouse's siblings. We're no longer looking at stepsons, stepdaughters who are spouse's children from a prior marriage. We're no longer looking at nieces and nephews as being something that would raise a question of partiality in the process. And the argument I hear for coming up with a narrower definition is that we don't unnecessarily or unreasonably want to impede recruitment of qualified candidates. We don't want to unnecessarily establish barriers to public service. Let me respond to that. First, let's look at the history here. The language we've had, what you want to call a broad definition of relatives, has still afforded us an opportunity of having many qualified candidates come before us. We praise the number of people we have and the number of citizens that have come forward and have served without conflicts under the current definition of relative. Why narrow it when there's not a problem with it from a historical standpoint? And even from a practical standpoint, let's examine some hypotheticals. Let's say you have a spouse's father or a spouse's sister who's an architect doing business in the city. Or you have the same in-law who is a contractor who does business with the city, like street patching. Or is even just a property owner who may at some point in time need a permit from the city. When that matter comes before the BRB, by the architect who has a client before the BRB, who's your father-in-law there, representing that client, or it's a contractor who has a successful bid and wants it approved by the council, and that's your brother-in-law there, who is the beneficiary of that contract. Or you have that property owner who's a niece or nephew that wants a special use permit or some other approval from the city. Why should not that board member, commission member, or council member say, I should not be participating in that? Whether you can argue I'm partial to my nephew, my father-in-law, my sister-in-law, or whether you just say there's an appearance there, we should not have that. And that's what I say, we should go back either to the old definition, the existing definition that has worked, that's not been a problem, or, I looked at Highland Park, and their definition, I think, says it very well if you want to simplify it. And I shared those definitions with you, so I would encourage your consideration of that. The second point is...
You have 5 of these?
Yes.
Could you try to tighten up the discussion?
I will speed it along. Although you have the benefit of my comments, the second one is the...
We all had these circulated to us.
Did you see that?
Yeah.
No, I'm not.
Right. The second comment relates to what I call domestic partners. Some municipalities have extended the word of spouse, because spouse typically is viewed as a married, wed relationship. And there I think we should expand it to include a domestic partner, civil union partner, whatever the best terminology there. The other third point I raised is when you look at where you could have a potential conflict, yes, relationship is certainly there. And again, we've talked about that. But it's also business partners, it's also personal friendship. And there's some vague language that we have in our code that I would recommend we be more specific and try and direct the concept of what we expect when a person is a business partner or has a personal relationship, best of friends, golf buddy, what have you. I think that should be addressed. The language we have in our policy section, we have 4 paragraphs there. It seems to ramble on forever. It talks about this idea of not wanting to establish unnecessary barriers. We use the word essential. I think that's going the wrong way. When you have a conflict of interest policy, you should err on the side of doing the right thing, of standing down, not taking part in it, recusing yourself, not voting on it. Keep in mind, the board's still going to function without that one vote, but it's going to have a great appearance to the citizens of the city. And I think we should be looking on that and erring on the side there. So I would recommend, reconsidering that policy provision. Those are my points.
Thank you.
I can address a couple of them. And these are policy issues, less than legal, but let me just sort of take a stab at addressing a couple of them. On the definition of relative, this was, again, something that the legal committee spent a lot of time on, and I don't want to second guess what the final decision, because it was unanimous of the legal committee. But and I mentioned this at the beginning, there was language added in the purpose section, which is 4001D, which is early on, that talks about that this policy is not intended to address every situation, that we expect officers and employees to exercise good judgment, and it also says, and to avoid situations or circumstances that may create an appearance of impropriety. Those are the type of situations that may not fall squarely within what we have as a defined statutory conflict of interest or a defined local conflict of interest, but it's a situation where the official or the employee themselves feels uncomfortable moving forward with a vote on something or participating in an action because even though it doesn't fall within the ordinance, and I've, in 20-something years, I've had this come up where an official asked me, is this a conflict of interest? It's my best friend who lives down the block, and our friends have been together, and they're coming in for zoning relief, and is this a conflict of interest? And it's not, because a lot of people in the city, and if it were a conflict of interest, every time you knew somebody that appeared before you, we'd have a hard time getting enough votes to vote on things. So that's why the actual true conflicts are far narrower than the situation where I would ask the person and say, no, it's not a statutory conflict of interest, and no, it doesn't fall under the local. But can you, as a city council member, vote on that action that involves your best friend who you've known forever, who lives down the street, based on the facts and based on the evidence presented to you, as opposed to taking an action based on your friendship? And if the answer is no, that the friendship is going to get in the way, then that is the type of appearance of impropriety, or what we look at as a common law conflict of interest, where you would say, I'm not comfortable voting on that, and I am going to affirmatively take the action to step out. Those are still, and I encourage, and maybe this is part of the training that many of you have talked about, training of officials and training of the employees, that it's not just about the four corners of the document, but there may be situations that aren't covered, but that you yourself need to make that judgment call. And that is exercising good judgment on behalf of the city and on behalf of your position. And I think that also goes to number 3, the business partners and the friends and the golf buddy. It would be really hard to define every situation. And I do think that it's going to be case by case, that I've had situations where people have said, you know what, yes, it's somebody I know really well, but I feel very comfortable and confident that I can exercise good judgment and put that aside to be able to do the best for the city and take an action. On the domestic partners, civil unions, the state, and not all states have done this, but the state of Illinois has really addressed that in state statutes. So if you look at the various state statutes, and they've been updated in the last couple of years, they've expanded how we look at spouse to the point where it covers many of these situations already. I have seen what you have seen, where people have affirmatively added it, which we can certainly do, but if we don't, and anywhere in our code that says spouse, state statute says that it's an expanded definition in Illinois for what spouse means. So I think it's covered unless there's a desire to actually add the word. It's covered by use of the word spouse. And then the questions about the policy and purpose, we didn't stray too far from what the 2004 initial ordinance was. And this was the discussion about balance, the balance between wanting to encourage the broadest number of people interested in serving the city in some capacity, that will have relationships, they will know people in the community, because of course the people that volunteer are the ones that have the largest group. We wanted to keep that language to make it clear that this ordinance isn't intended to take away from that we want people to exercise good judgment. We want people to think on behalf of the city and do the best for the city, but not make it so difficult for the members to participate in actions and serve on communities. But it's less of a legal issue than a policy issue, but it was something that was discussed. It's in the current language. We really didn't expand on it, but the thought was that at some point 15 years ago, that was important to the city council, and that it didn't seem that there was a move away from that that balance between, you know, having the largest net for people to serve and volunteer while still protecting the integrity of the decisions that the officials, the officers, and the employees make. So I think that at least tried to address the issues.
Thank you.
I would say, I mean, so those 2 points that you just mentioned are not mutually exclusive, and I think that judgment clause that you mentioned is really important and applicable because, you know, every petition that I was on through the HPC for 6 years, the chairman started the meeting by saying, does anybody have any conflicts of interest or have there been any ex parte communications? And that judgment is exercised over and over and over again, and it's a legacy of all the people that have served here, and it's modeled by everybody up here and everybody that serves on the boards and commissions. And for us to wordsmith things isn't going to change that. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to be leaders in the community and to advocate for strong ethics. And while I totally understand we want to get the wording right, but after 18 months and 3 lawyers that are working on it, and you know, it's really important to support the subcommittee and their work and also to validate it, but I would really refrain from us wordsmithing this document so every single person is happy with every phrase here when there's been that much work done, and it's directionally very, very strong.
Other comments from the council?
Well, I'd only like to add, thank you, having served on several committees where your grassroots involved with many architects and homeowners, well, obviously homeowners who are here in town, but architects who are based in town. I mean, anyone who's lived in this town for any period of time, I'm not going to suggest you know everybody, but you do. I mean, it's a small town, and you would prevent people who are trying to do business in town from doing business in the city. And I echo both our city attorney and Alderman Preschlack's points about it's coming down to exercising good judgment on whether you can deliberate and consider with impartiality a petitioner's request in front of you.
Alderman Bush.
Just a couple points in response. At one time, you're arguing that it was good, 13 years ago, so it's got to be good today, yet that doesn't seem to be true of the definition of relative. We are changing it. Why are we changing it today? Is it really appropriate? Is it really desirable? Is it really consistent with where you want to come out? And, you do talk about this document being the guiding document. So, yes, it is very important for each one of us to have an ethical standard, to have importance of our integrity and what we do, but this document is intended to be the guidepost for doing something. And so if we want to hit on a point and emphasize a point, we should be doing that. This is the council, we're going to make the final decision. And again, appreciate all the input, but I do encourage you to think about it. I'd also encourage the council not to waive first reading on this. This matter comes before the council the first time. It should be something the public should have an opportunity to provide input on, something that we should not be, ignoring at this point in time.
Not seeing any evidence of further comments. Actually, now is the time for the public to speak to us about this. So if there's any member of the public that would like to comment on this, please step forward. Okay. There being none, I would entertain a motion.
Well, I would move to approve the ordinance as written.
As presented, okay?
Seconded.
Do I have a second?
Mayor, I think there is one public comment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just going to request that this be a first reading, that's all, if that's possible.
Could you step forward, please? Follow the procedures, state your name, so forth.
Away from the DS. Joanne Desmond, 1681 Yelkit. I would just make a request because Alderman Bushman made some excellent points, and I believe that most people are very well intentioned, but I do believe that what is in that document is a document for people to look at and to make decisions based upon what is the foundation. And I'd like this to be a first reading, please. Thank you.
Thank you. So the motion on the table is to...
It's not on the table.
the motion being brought forward.
Well, there was.
I made a motion.
A motion
To
made
accept.
to accept.
And it was seconded.
And it was seconded.
So now is
Was
it-
it for first and final?
I said as written. However, I certainly, it's my prerogative to amend that motion, I believe, at this point, if I would so choose, but it would have to be seconded if I were to amend it. So I certainly am always in favor of public discourse on anything, and Alderman Bushman did bring forth some very interesting questions. I think that Julie's responses were also very interesting, and so it never hurts for everyone to think about these issues for another couple of weeks until this can come before the council again. So I would be fine with amending my motion to make this just a first reading.
Okay.
Great.
Do we have a second on that?
Second.
2 seconds. Pick one. And this is a roll call vote, so
Will you just confirm we're voting on
first reading.
first reading? So we approving, okay, first reading is written, but we're going to see it again. And
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Alderman Beidler.
Aye.
Alderman Morris.
Aye.
Alderman Rummel.
Aye.
Alderman Notes.
Aye.
Alderman Preschlack.
Aye.
Alderman Gushkarian.
Aye.
Alderman Bushman.
Nay.
Mr. Mayor, point of order. Just to clarify Alderman Bushman's position, I think it's fair for a motion to reconsider, which has to be brought by the prevailing side that carried the motion. So I would like to offer up a motion to reconsider, and in that motion, we can table. So there's a motion brought forward from me on the prevailing side, according to Robert's rules, that we're allowed to make a motion for reconsideration and to table that, to place on the table that motion that I have just brought forward.
Okay, so explain to everybody else on the
we do that?
council where that leaves
Doing
us.
your homework.
Yeah, I've been stuck in governance boards for too long.
Okay, so explain
So
where that leaves
on
the
the,
council.
on the prevailing, on the motion that was just brought forward that was passed, there's an opportunity for a motion to reconsider, but it must be brought forward on the prevailing side. And in support of what Alderman Rummel just suggested, as well as a member from the public, a motion on the prevailing side may be brought forward for reconsideration. And Julie, please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, just to clarify, the council only approved first reading, so this is coming back for second reading
Is
at the
first
next
reading?
Have a
meeting.
reconsideration
Yes.
built
Okay.
in.
Yeah,
So I don't know
amended
that you
my mo-
need
I
to
amended my
reconsider.
motion.
She amended her motion, so
Okay.
what was approved was just first reading, and then it's going to come back for second reading at the next
Okay,
meeting.
thank you.
Which I think
I'm
is what
sorry.
you were looking
Okay.
for.
There'll be another opportunity.
Forgive me, I just wanted to make sure that,
Yep.
I wanted to make sure that all sides were heard.
It'll
I'm
give
sorry.
Alderman Bushman time to lobby the council to get what he wants, so.
You can explain that later.
So that's
So-
6 yay, 1 nay, motion carries, first reading.
Bingo.
Okay.
Okay.
And we'll see this again. Okay, the next item on the agenda is new business. It's getting late, so. We have one item of new business, which is consideration of a recommendation from the Plan Commission in support of amendments to section 159.002, 159.068, and 159.003 of the City of Lake Forest Code relating to the prohibition of cannabis businesses. If desired by the council, waive first reading and grant final approval of the ordinance presented by Catherine Cerniak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I will be brief, really. As the council is aware, on January 1st, 2020, the use and sale of recreational cannabis will be legal. In July of this year, the city council held a workshop, and you received information on the law that was passed from the city attorney. At that workshop, you directed staff to work with the city attorney to prepare a code amendment to take advantage of the opt-out provision provided in the legislation. The city attorney prepared that code amendment language. You have it in front of you. The ordinance is included in your packet on page 203. The proposed changes affect 3 sections of the zoning code. This item was brought before the Plan Commission on September 11th. They held a public hearing. They did not receive any public comment. They did forward a recommendation based on a 5-0 vote to you in support of those code amendments. The Plan Commission recognized that there are likely to be further changes to the law, both at the federal level and at the state level, laws as they pertain to cannabis. So the Plan Commission acknowledged that it may be necessary, or the council may direct that the Plan Commission reconsider code language related to cannabis in the future, but they felt that it was not appropriate for the city to be out in front on this. So the only other thing I'd add is that Police Chief Carl Waldorf and I are both participating in a task force that involves many municipalities, being led by Lake County. So we're involved in continuous discussions, talking with other communities about what they're doing, and it will be interesting to see the experience that others have. So if you choose to do so this evening, it will be appropriate to waive first reading and grant final approval of an ordinance adopting the code amendments as presented. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Question?
Alderman Morris.
I'm all in favor of these, but information what's happening in communities around us, North Chicago,
I do believe, I think I just read that Lake Bluff recently, maybe last week, did opt out. They also adopted code amendments to prohibit. There are many communities that appear to be moving forward, or at least having discussions about moving forward with allowing cannabis businesses. I think in July when you talked about this, we actually told you we would bring forward zoning code amendments and some code amendments that the police chief are working on. We told you we'd bring those back together. The police chief is still working on those code amendments. We felt it was important to bring you the zoning code amendments now because staff is receiving contacts. We are getting calls. So knowing where the council is on this will allow us to respond affirmatively to businesses that are calling and inquiring.
Kathy, I think before, oh, forgive me.
It has been mentioned that there are perhaps only a limited number of these approvals that would be coming from the state or licenses for this, and so communities who opt out at this point, were they to change their mind down the road, might not be able to opt in. Not that I'm suggesting that we would be one of those, but I would certainly like to know if this is something that will preclude us from moving ahead if we find that this is a great revenue or whatever.
So I can answer that, Alderman Rummel. The initial batch of licenses, of the recreational licenses, will go to existing medical marijuana dispensaries. So they get the first applications in, and they get the first batch of licenses that are being released. So, and for second sites, so they can open their current medical as a recreational, so to expand that operation, but they also can open up those existing licensees, have first crack at what they call second sites. And the reason and the rationale is the state wants to get this up and running as fast as possible in January, and they've already vetted these companies. So from the background checks, and they're pretty significant. That's the first round. So the fact that Lake Forest doesn't have a medical dispensary currently, we wouldn't get one of those first round of licenses anyway. The second round of licenses will be released, they think, about a year later. So first round of licenses, the applications are being accepted now, will be issued by January. Second round might be 2021. But there's the potential for hundreds of new licenses to be released over time. The state has left it open to expand depending on demand. So I don't know that we'll run out of licenses. They may run out of demand or marketing. So if all of the licenses are issued, but the demand is high, the state can just issue more licenses. So I don't know that, I've heard the same issue, I've heard communities say that. There's always a possibility that the demand is less than the supply, so there isn't a need for new dispensaries. But from what I've heard from other communities that have went through that, it's unlikely that there will be plenty of demand. So that if the city in a year or two changes its mind, I think that you would probably get a dispensary.
I don't know if this is for the city attorney or for you, Kathy, but I was looking here, do we build in a provision to look at this again in some time period? And I'm not, what was?
At the council's discretion, you can direct the plan commission at any time to reconsider any provision of the code. So this is, and the plan commission very much understood that laws may change, opportunities may change, the council's opinion may change, so there's always that provision. This was, the intent is just to take a stand at this point in time.
Yeah, I just, it's like any big policy decision that we have to debate and discuss. It's like, what are the marginal costs and benefits to our community? Just big picture. I mean, if you look at marginal benefits, and I was talking to Jason before the meeting, I think we estimated, and it could be conservative, that this is an incremental $95,000 of revenue. That's 0.001% of our budget. So this is, and on the marginal cost side, there's a lot of different layers to that. There's the branding effect to the community and the signal to the market. There's certainly the destigmatization of it for the youth and other things. And I think Alderman Gary did a nice job of providing some medical information to us prior to the workshop. There's lots of longitudinal studies that are going to come out about the impact to the brain, and so it's a little bit early to tell, but there's results there. So I don't think we should spend a ton of time talking about something that is an incremental revenue of $95,000, and the costs are pretty tangible in terms of the impact to health and to the community and the brand. So that's my position on the issue, and I wasn't at the workshop, so I just wanted to clarify.
So I would make a motion that we approve this.
We have to get public comment first?
I'm sorry.
So, any member of the public would like to comment on this issue? Okay, now.
Now I can make an emotion.
Wait.
Oh, wait.
I'm sorry.
I think Peter was.
Tonight's city council member.
Excuse me, could you introduce yourself, please?
I'm Peter Bensinger, a resident of Lake Forest with my wife for over 37 years. And this council hearing is very impressive as a resident for the issues that you address. Now, this issue, I know something about it. I've served as chairman of the Illinois Youth Commission, director of corrections, chairman of the Illinois Criminal Justice Authority, and the head of DEA under 3 presidents, and have been a member and chairman of the City of Lake Forest Police and Fire Commission. The recommendation of the Plan Commission makes sense. Lake Forest doesn't need nor should have pot shops in our community. What that would mean is more availability of marijuana. What that would mean is more use by teenagers and children. What that would mean was more sales by gangs and illegal drug dealers who would get straw purchases and then sell these at lower prices to underage buyers. Traffic accidents would go up, including probably fatalities. There's a lot of information on this subject. This community is safe compared to others. You don't want to attract the type of buyers and sellers of marijuana that will come. I've talked to people in other communities where this has happened. In Colorado, and the Lurie Children's Hospital has taken a position on this, which is interesting. because they don't want marijuana available for children, teenagers, or pregnant women. You put in pop shops, you're going to get more marijuana. You get more marijuana, you're going to have more addiction. You're going to have more crime, you're going to have more use by kids, and we're going to change the nature of our community. Enough said. I have lots of data to back up my comments, but I appreciate your offering the public an opportunity to speak, and I would urge you to adopt the Plan Commission recommendation.
Thank you very much.
And that's what I was about to do.
Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak on this subject? Okay. Now I would entertain a motion.
So I would like to move that we accept the Plan Commission's recommendation regarding the sale of cannabis in Lake
And
Forest.
this is potentially first and final waive final reading.
Second.
Yes, it's first and final reading.
Right. We have a second from Alderman Bushman. Roll call vote.
Alderman Beidler?
Aye.
Alderman Morris?
Aye.
Alderman Rommel?
Aye.
Alderman Notes?
Aye.
Alderman Preschlack?
Aye.
Alderman Gashgarian?
Aye.
Alderman Bushman?
Aye.
7 yea, 0 nay, motion carries.
Thank you all. The next item on our agenda is additional items for discussion, comments by council members. We had a couple at the beginning. There may be some remaining at the end, if there are.
Yeah,
Okay.
I just have a question. How do you want me to handle this Gorton agreement? Should I just talk to city attorney about it? We'll just talk. Okay,
Yeah,
fine.
and then,
Let us
you know,
Yeah, I have lots of history on it too. 'Cause
Yeah.
I was on the other side.
Yeah.
yeah.
Let's start with Julian.
Yeah,
If
you know,
there's anything I can't answer from the history side of things, I'll talk to
yeah, I
Alderman
don't know that it's
Morris.
history as much as some other stuff. And I just want to be, this is the first time I've seen the whole agreement. Before we just saw the amendment. So I'm not trying to be, or not doing my home, I mean, I actually very much did the homework on this, but had not seen it before, so thank
And
you.
then it's also something that Alderman Preschlack, as head of the PPL, probably should be involved in, because that's really where the negotiation took place.
Yeah, and
Is
again,
this-
the impetus of that conversation was the board seats, just as it kind of got increased, as the board became a bigger kind of marketing arm, our city stake increased, and we just thought that was prudent. We didn't take a look to relitigate the whole agreement at that time, because we didn't think it was necessary. So I think if there's suggestions on areas to explore as to the rationale for what was done before, that'd be great to
But this is
explore.
approving a whole new agreement as this.
Well,
the
just
first
changes to the
But this
existing.
first.
It's an amendment to
But
the
this
agreement.
first amendment is amending and restating the whole agreement.
Right.
Right.
Can I just
As a
ask,
point of
though-
record, though,
But the
there,
only thing that's changed
there
is the
were,
amendment.
and again, I think it's helpful to answer any questions you have, at a later date, but there were minimal changes made from when this was last brought before the city council in June. There were a couple, clarifying language corrections on the financial reporting of the Gorton budget and how that is presented to the city. But in terms of changes from 4 months ago, there are not too many. I understand you may have had some questions about the agreement as presented to the city council earlier this year. And again, to the degree that the city attorney can answer those questions, I think it would be good for you guys to have that conversation. And then certainly,
We'll just-
if there are further questions or concerns after those conversations, we can assess sort of.
I don't think, I'm not structurally changing this tremendously. I just have some issues about covering the city in some liability cases and things like that. And as I recall, the only thing we saw before were the amended portions. We didn't see the agreement in its entirety, which, when you're doing a it's like, well, I mean, it's just legal. When you do a First Amendment and restate the whole thing, that's what this is. The whole document is then up for review.
Although I should
and
point
approval.
out, the whole document was not renegotiated with Gorton.
No.
which is a
I
whole other
understand.
issue.
I understand.
So-
You know, you're not going to mind these, believe
Well,
me,
and I think
don't
your
panic.
suggestion, we tried to include the entire document, the red line version this time, so it's a good suggestion.
So, Alderman Beiler.
I have a process question. My understanding was, however, that Gorton has already approved the document that we saw. Is that correct?
Yes,
That
that's
is
my
correct.
understanding.
So then, if in fact changes are recommended
They'll have
as
to
a
go
result
back.
of your
Go
discussion,
back.
does that go to us first, or does that go back to Gorton and then come to us?
Well, I mean, I guess.
We need to build that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that
we'll
in.
build it in.
That's from my
yeah.
mic here. Yeah.
Well, I guess, let me just say, no document is permanent, right? So
Yeah.
if there are things in this document outside, the important thing here is to create a more viable process where we can actually fulfill the obligations that the city has to provide the right number of representatives on the board. That's the issue that was at stake here. There are many other things in this document. I was very involved in negotiating the original document based on the experiences we had with Gorton. I was involved on the Gorton side. I was then involved on the city council side. That can be re-looked at anytime. But for the purposes of now, we have a problem that needs to get solved. So that's just my observation. Maybe try to keep the eye on the ball here, get this part done, and then if there are things that we want to fix in the document, that can always be done. We don't have any leverage right now,
Seconded.
particularly, right? We have negative leverage, if you will, because we're trying to reduce the number of, we don't have not that, I won't get into it, but it would be valuable, I think, to the city, to the caucus, to the foundation board to know that the agreement is moving forward and getting resolved. And then if there are other things that we want to tweak, we probably want to save that, in my opinion, for a later date.
Well,
when
I don't know that you'll find these tweaks that, we'll talk. I'll talk to Julianne.
It's not so much us, as is pointed out by Alderman Beidler, it's, does Gorton think that they're significant?
the
And does that
process right.
then give them a position where all of a sudden we've reopened the whole thing and we've lost the ability to get the one thing done we really wanted to get done, so. Alderman Notes.
I was surprised that the entire agreement was being restated instead of simply amending the provision. Can you address that, please?
Sure. The last time that this was presented, it was presented as a First Amendment, and it only included just the changes. That's how I presented it. Alderman Rummel expressed concerns about not seeing how those changes were incorporated into the agreement, which is why it was presented as the full agreement, so that you could see everything. But it wasn't intended to reopen up the agreement because we were just trying to address that one.
That's my
members
fear
issue.
when you start doing this, that you're.
Yes, exactly.
That it, so.
Well, if you show an attorney in a document, we're gonna make changes. I mean, that's just how it works. There's no document that an attorney's gonna look at and have no comments, you know?
And isn't that
And that's a
wonderful?
good thing.
Isn't it great
and
to have that
also
due
slows up
diligence?
things that need to get done. And I'm channeling my inner Jack Reisenberg right now.
Let's try to get a
Time to-
first down
time to
here and
go.
not worry about scoring the touchdown.
Right, exactly. We're actually good.
Right.
It's moving in the right direction.
Okay. Any other comments by council members? Okay, in that case, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
You know, the tenants have leased